Thank you for joining us. I'm Lynn Robinson with the Department of Municipal and Provincial Affairs, and I'm the moderator for today's question and answer session. Joining us today are the Honourable Krista Lynn Howell, Minister of Municipal and Provincial Affairs, Amy Coady, President of Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador, Brian Hudson, President of the Professional Municipal Administrators, and Ted Lomond, Deputy Minister for Municipal and Provincial Affairs. Please stand by. Our news conference will begin shortly.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm so pleased to be here to share this with Amy Coady, the President of Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador, and Brian Hudson, the President of the Professional Municipal Administrators. And on the record, I would like to thank both of you for your help and support and your willingness to collaborate on all things as we work to improve municipalities in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I'm very pleased to provide you today with details on the proposed new Municipal Conduct Act, which will receive second reading this afternoon. This new legislation is a significant step forward for municipal governance in our province, for municipalities, their councils, all their members and staff. It'll govern conflict of interest, ethical behavior, and professional conduct for all communities. This new legislation was developed as sort of a byproduct from consultations on the review of the municipal legislation and through ongoing discussions with all our municipal partners, with municipalities, NL, as well as PMA and our cities and towns. During these public consultations, professional behavior emerged as a key issue to be addressed. And over the years, municipal officials have reported issues related to conflict of interest, ethical behavior, and professionalism. And these are certainly priority issues for this government and for municipalities. So the primary concerns that were raised included things such as inadequate and inconsistent definitions of conflict of interest, no ability to reduce or remove a penalty when a conflict occurs through genuine error, harassment and bullying in the workplace, misconceptions about the authority and responsibility of a council and their relationship between councils and staff, as well as a lack of awareness and training. So code of conduct issues could range from anything between compromising public trust to poor attendance. So it was clear that whatever the issue was or whatever the severity of it, it was essential that councils have the legislative authority and the training and tools that they need to appropriately and effectively address these concerns. So here we are. The Municipal Conduct Act will increase clarity and harmonize procedures for conflict of interest, will define a conflict of interest and introduce a common set of rules for all municipalities regarding conflict of interest. The proposal will require municipalities to establish a code of conduct for all municipal officials, including council members, employees, fire departments, personnel, and anyone who's acting on behalf of a municipality in any official capacity, like your volunteers. We'll hope to set out penalties and require council to administer these penalties where a council member or senior staff member acts in a conflict of interest or in violation of the Code of Conduct. There will also be an introduction of mandatory training for councillors and senior staff. Inherent in the legislation is the aim to reduce gender-based harassment and barriers for women and marginalized groups. The legislation will contribute to reducing barriers to entering politics for women, for non-binary persons, and other marginalized groups such as seniors, persons with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ+ community, Indigenous peoples, people of color, and immigrants. All of these individuals can add so much value to their communities, and we want to ensure that we can create a path for them to do so. It'll result in improved respectfulness, professionalism, and workplace safety and wellness in council chambers and municipal workplaces, ensuring that councils are more inclusive and address barriers that may prohibit people from participating in local government. The code of conduct that municipalities will be required to establish must, at a very minimum, address topics like use of influence, harassment, and confidentiality. Our department will provide a template so that communities can utilize it or beef it up, build upon it to make it fit their specific needs. Municipalities will be required to establish a complaints procedure, and as they do so currently, they employ the use of an external investigator when necessary to investigate or mediate in severe cases. The bill introduces reasonableness as a legal test for conflict and sets out procedures for councillor disclosure of interest and exclusion from participation in matters where conflict exists. This new legislation identifies an appropriate range of penalties for elected officials found in violation of conduct rules, including the removal of a councillor from their seat. As I referenced, the proposed legislation requires municipalities to provide a code of conduct training for all officials whom the code applies. This training will be central to the establishment of codes of conduct by municipalities, equally important the extent to which they will be followed. The mandatory training requirements will be set out in the regulations, and these regulations will require councillors and senior staff to participate in a mandatory core training. If the training is not completed, then the duties of the councillor or the senior staff member cannot be carried out. There will be comprehensive training and guidance for communities from the department as well as from M&L and PMA as we work on this together. I have seen firsthand in my former life as a councillor and a mayor the challenges that can develop because of a lack of understanding or information on matters related to conduct or conflict of interest. So this proposed bill is really raising local governance in our province to a new level. It provides clear guidelines for councils, and it's in step or it's stronger than similar legislation in most other jurisdictions across the country. And I think this speaks to the importance and the value of mayors and councillors and staff in their communities and the good work that they do. Councils are elected officials. We call them local governments because they do just that. They govern locally. They have been entrusted with the responsibilities of managing a community, and they're held to expected standards in doing so. So it's kind of like that quote that says, with great power comes great responsibility. You know, we have these councils who are acting on behalf of so many members, and we want them to do so accountably. The bill is also gender-free legislation. This means it's been drafted without reference to his or her, she, him, or other gender identifiers. I would like to thank everyone who's contributed to the development of this legislation, our municipal partners, M&L, PMA, and the cities and towns across the province. We've worked collaboratively on this to make it a reality for our communities. We look forward to working with you and ensuring municipalities are prepared and trained to implement this important new legislation. It certainly reflects our joint efforts to improve the functioning of councils and to give them the tools that they need to make issues of harassment and conduct a rare occurrence that will be dealt with appropriately and effectively. It is indeed a proud moment for a former young mayor and a female councillor, female mayor, whose experience in local government was very positive and certainly life-altering. Today, I feel like in some small way, I've assisted in ensuring that the many others who come behind me can experience the same. I'd like to now pass it over to Amy Coady and then on to Brian Hudson for additional comments. Again, thank you so much for your both for your valued contributions and for the support of your respective organizations.
Thank you, Minister. Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador welcomes this Code of Conduct legislation. As municipalities in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have a lot of work ahead of us to ensure that our communities have the right services, programs, and infrastructure for the needs of our current and future residents. We must balance meeting these needs with legislative requirements and demands of climate change, our economic realities, and the funding that is available to us. Doing this important work requires good, strong governance. We need frameworks and tools to support this. We believe that this legislation is a necessary tool to support that good governance. The legislation provides the clarity and the flexibility that local governments need to address conduct and conflict issues. Through the financial support of the Department of Municipal and Provincial Affairs, M&L launched the 2021 Make Your Mark campaign in July. The purpose of this campaign was twofold: to encourage more people to put their names forward on the ballot for the September 28th municipal elections, and to emphasize that our councils must be diverse, they must be reflective of the communities they represent. We have to encourage diverse candidates to run, and we have to support them when they get elected. The Code of Conduct Act sets out a mandatory requirement to councils to establish their own codes of conduct to address things like conflict of interest, confidentiality, harassment, and bullying, and to put processes in place for complaints and to receive mandatory training to support them in their roles. We are looking forward to working with the Department of Professional Municipal Administrators on the implementation of this legislation, including the development of regulations associated with it. This will make a difference in our sector.
Thank you, Minister Howell. Professional municipal administrators have advocated for more modern municipal legislation, including enhanced code of conducts and related mandatory training. This bill provides for an expansion and clarity to municipal conflict of interest as it relates to municipal management and elected officials. Of particular note, this is the first time that conflict of interest legislation will apply to municipal employees. PMA supports unequivocally this professional change. This bill will also, as you mentioned, require 2 codes of conduct, which will apply to elected officials and senior administrators and all other municipal officials. PMA, over the years, has worked well with Municipalities NL and the Department of Municipal and Provincial Affairs to address ongoing concerns as it relates to current legislation. We look forward to working with you on this integration and rollout of mandatory training, as well as our partners at Municipalities NL. And we're also looking forward to working as a joint partnership on additional modern municipal legislation that will go hand in hand with the Code of Conduct. PMA is happy to support and endorse this professional conduct legislation, and again, we look forward to working with all partners on rolling this out over the coming months. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. We'll pass it back to you, Lynn.
Thank you, Minister. For the benefit of our speakers, we have 2 media joining by phone today. There will be 2 rounds in the question and answer session, which will give each reporter the opportunity to ask 1 question and 1 follow-up per round. Our first questions are from Richard Duggan with VOCM. Please go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. Minister, can you speak to how often conduct and conflict violations are occurring and why these changes were needed at this time?
Well, I think that there are certainly implications that have brought us to bring this in at this point in time. On average, our department usually addresses one major conflict a year, but there are certainly different communities who experience this from time to time within their councils. And I think it's because some of the clarity points that have been missing in our outlines, they haven't really had the option or the ability to really navigate appropriately and determine if they could step away because they were in conflict, or if they should probably just keep their mouth shut and sit off to the side anyway. So we're hoping that by introducing this legislation, we will give a more clear path, more definitive lines, so councillors can determine if they are indeed in conflict of interest, and or if they're not in conflict, and give councils the ability to address that. And I think to your point about why now, it's because we've been continuing to focus on our communities. We've been placing an increased importance on the role of local governments and how they move forward. And right now is the time to get this happening and to make things more fluid in our communities so that we can all move forward together.
Do you have a follow-up question, Richard? We'll move on to Ben Cleary now with NTV. We can come back to Richard. Ben, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, everyone. I guess my first question is pretty general, but it's just in terms of the hundreds of municipalities across the province, will this new legislation change the way that town halls are run?
Thanks, Ben. I hope so. I hope that this gives them an avenue by which they have another tool in their toolbox. It will hopefully be something that they can implement and see as a benefit to their community. It will be a tool that they can use to make sure they have concrete answers to some of the most important questions, and support as they move forward on very important decisions in their communities. And it's certainly something that we've worked long and hard on, and it is a topic that has come up throughout the communities. It's a source of stress sometimes for councillors, and we want to make sure that we can reduce those barriers and implement this legislation so that things run more smoothly in the communities all across the province of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you. And Minister, you mentioned marginalized groups. How does this legislation create a path, do you think, for more people to participate in office?
Well, that's a great question, because that's certainly something that we want to speak to. We've worked closely with our partners to encourage all different types of people with different types of perspectives to be part of councils all across the province, and we want to bring in this legislation so that we have a firm framework by which we understand how councils can operate respectfully, with ethical behavior, professionalism, and certainly within specific codes of conduct. And by doing that, we eliminate a lot of the questions and the queries that come along when we're dealing with certain types of people and interactions. And things certainly do get passionate when you're talking about municipal issues, and sometimes we kind of lose track of what you're trying to accomplish when you have so much passion about an issue. So we certainly hope that this legislation lays out some guidelines as to how councils can behave and how we can be respectful working together.
Richard Duggan with VOCM. Do you have any follow-up questions?
Hi there. Yes. Sorry, my line got disconnected after my first question. Minister, I'm just wondering, what sort of timelines are you looking at to have this fully implemented?
Well, we're working as quickly as we can on this. It's certainly something that's of utmost importance. I think the timeline that we've been given is 6 months to make sure we have programming in place for the mandatory training. And we want to get within that tight deadline to make sure we have that information available to our municipalities. And thereafter, we want to give them 3 months to participate in the training so that they can get all their councils and their staff up to date. So somewhere within the realm of 9 months, we would like to have this up and running.
And are you concerned that in the past, due to there being, I guess, a lack of clarity around these situations, that there were some violations that just weren't being reported or investigated?
Well, let's be clear. Councils do a great job at what they're doing. They've worked very well with the information that they've had. So we want to ensure that this is an additional tool that they can use. Moving forward, we want to have these guidelines set out so that they know where the boundaries are and the roles and responsibilities are clear and the expectations are laid out. So we hope that this will be just an additional source for the communities and something that they can use to better their leadership skills.
Thank you.
Richard, did you have one more question since you were disconnected earlier?
Yes, this question would be for Amy Coady. Just overall, I was wondering, what have you been hearing from your members in terms of the need for this type of legislation?
Thank you, Richard. MNL has been talking to our membership for quite some time on code of conduct, and at every symposium convention that we hold, we always have a session on how to conduct yourself, what would be a conflict of interest, how you could find yourself in a conflict of interest. So this legislation certainly helps us to better communicate to our membership how you would be in a conflict of interest, and more so than just being in a conflict, how to conduct yourself as a municipal councillor within your community and within council chambers, on a day-to-day basis. So we have a resolution coming forward from our membership, which will happen at our convention in November, that talks about code of conduct resolution, and that we will continue to work with the Department of Municipal and Provincial Affairs to make sure that this work gets carried out so that there is a clearer understanding to our members on how to conduct yourself, what is considered appropriate behavior, so that there's a better understanding so you don't find yourself in those situations where you may not even have realized that you have overstepped or crossed a line. So that's very important to us. We'll continue to work with the department, the collaboration between the departments, with PMA, with the Municipal and Provincial Affairs, with the Minister, has been so appreciative. We appreciate having the conversations and to being able to work together to bring this legislation forward. It's very important to our members, and it just draws a clear path.
Ben Cleary with NTV, do you have any further questions?
Yes, I do, thank you. I know it was touched on kind of a little bit there, but can you walk me through a little bit of the training and what councillors and municipal employees can expect to be taught through this training?
Well, right now, councillors do receive training. All new councillors have the opportunity to connect with the department and receive the training, as well as MNL PMA offer training about budgets, training about how to conduct a meeting, training about how to keep track of records and things like that. But right now it's not mandatory that they participate in that. So moving forward, we will be making this training mandatory for all new councillors, and that will certainly include prescriptions of what constitutes a conflict of interest, the process by which you would conduct business if there is a conflict identified, talking about some of the penalties that may be laid out. And we also want to talk about professional behaviors and attitudes and how you just conduct yourself between councillors, how councillors interact with staff, and how all of the municipal officials interact with the community.
Thank you. And I guess my last question is for Amy Coady, and that's just: do you hope that this new code of conduct will see more people running for municipal politics in the future?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it will make a big difference to the amount of people from all types of backgrounds that we see putting themselves forward and putting themselves on a ballot to run for municipal politics. It's a very important piece of legislation. We understand that there are barriers currently, and that there are people who feel marginalized or feel that their input and is not going to be valued. So having this legislation in place, it really supports them. It gives clear definition to municipal councillors about what is appropriate and what is not. Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador has a memorandum of understanding with the College of the North Atlantic, where we have developed municipal councillor training, which is based on the Department of Municipal and Provincial Affairs booklet on the 2021 Council Handbook, which has just been updated. So we're looking forward to working with the department to help develop that training, develop those regulations to make sure that when you run for municipal politics, that you're aware of what is encouraged behavior, what is appropriate behavior and conduct, but more so once you become elected, that you're held to those standards and that you have a clear understanding as soon as you are sworn as a councillor that this is how you are expected to conduct yourself and to conduct business as as you represent your communities right around the province.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stay safe and have an enjoyable day.